For the past 2 years, Billy Corgan and Dave Lagana have been slowly and quietly rebuilding, brick by brick, piece by piece, the NWA name. Trying to resurrect a kind of pro wrestling that has been missing for a very long time. Corgan has said before that he grew up on an era of wrestling that was based primarily around personalities. Yeah, not so much the matches or anything else, but the personalities themselves. What motivates them, why we love them, why we hate them, why we want to pay money to see them. Out of nowhere this week, seemingly, in this sea of wrestling television that we now have, lost in all of the noise of AEW against NXT and the WWE draft and all of the things that have been going on, the NWA recently had its first set of TV tapings at the beginning of the month, and this past Tuesday, their new Power show, NWA Power, debuted on their YouTube channel and their Facebook page. I mentioned it last week because a lot of you had no idea that this was even happening or when it was happening, and I got a lot of thank you tweets and thank you messages from people after saying, oh, thank you for mentioning this. I never would have known this was great. So that was really cool to hear from so many people who just didn't know. And were it not for them hearing me mention it on the podcast last week, I mean, they probably would have gone back and watched it after hearing all the buzz. But they watched the NWA show because I had mentioned it the week before. And I had mentioned the fact that I was genuinely looking forward to seeing what the finished product looked like. I had seen the photos, I had seen the still shots from the studio setting, and they did a hell of a job, even just from looking at those photos, it seemed, of recreating an environment and an atmosphere from 30 years ago, from like this bygone era. And I was genuinely curious and interested to see what the video looked like. And this new show, it premiered on Tuesday, 6:05 p.m. Eastern. And as of this morning, it had gotten over 370,000 views. I think the live airing did about 15 or 20,000, but since then, it has just grown and grown and grown from word of mouth to closing in soon on 400,000 views. And it's very strong word of mouth, believe me, that has led to those numbers, because it has gotten a lot of positive feedback. They even got a shout out from The Rock on Twitter. The Rock said, congrats to Jim Cornette, one of the announcers. The boys, the crew, stumbled across this show last night, and I enjoyed it. I grew up in the territories. I started my career on Channel 5 in Memphis, so I have a lot of love and a lot of respect for small-scale crowd TV shows. Cool vintage feel. Keep working hard. That's from The Rock. That wrestling that Corgan grew up on, focusing on strong personalities, came through here in spades. That is exactly what made this first debut episode so strong. It was not a bunch of great matches, although I did enjoy the main event between Nick Aldis and Tim Storm. I thought they had a good match. It wasn't about having great matches or long matches. It was a focus on great promos, great unscripted promos, and strong personalities. And it made for a very enjoyable hour that flew by for me. Now, watching this, it felt like a pilot for a network to pick up. About a year ago this month, Corgan did an interview with a website called The Ringer. And at that time, he told them, I don't need anybody's financing. I don't need anybody's TV network. I can operate on my own and do exactly as I please. Well, there was a note in the most recent Observer, which was credited to something that Corgan himself said, although I couldn't find the interview, where he now admits that this model is not economically sustainable in the long term. I don't see how it could be. You know, as good as the show looked, production-wise, it looked great. If they're only on YouTube and Facebook, it would only make sense that they would have to secure some kind of a TV deal. And get some more money behind it, you know, beyond whatever money Corgan himself is putting into the project. This is not a touring brand. I mean, maybe one day it can be. But what I mean is, this is not designed to be a touring brand. This is a television show. This is a studio television show. It belongs on TV. And after watching this first show, I'm pulling for them to find a home on a station somewhere soon. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that it's on YouTube. It's the easiest thing in the world to watch. But I would like to see this thing succeed. I mean, they clearly have a very dedicated crew behind them. They have a team in place. I would like to see this gain traction and go on for some time and really become, again, in the long term, well into next year, a weekly option for people who want this kind of wrestling to be able to go ahead and watch it. 1 hour a week. It's an easy watch. But I couldn't help but watch this and feel like this is more of a pilot. What's going to be 3 months from now if they don't have some kind of TV deal? I don't know. One issue with NXT and AEW, as much as I love both shows, and we did get that great Chris Jericho promo this past week on AEW in the ring, but for the most part, from what I've seen these last few weeks, NXT and AEW both suffer from the formula of match, 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 with very little, if anything, in between. There's almost no buffer between all these matches. The NWA, on this first episode, had the perfect blend of matches with great promos mixed in between. The promos really were more of the focus even than the matches themselves. They have a two-man booth, Joe Galley, who by day is a news reporter out of San Antonio, and Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette, I mean, this is his wheelhouse. I mean, this is the era that not only did he grow up on, he was part of that era. Studio wrestling in Memphis and the NWA and Georgia and all these different, the different territories. So he's just on cloud nine. You can see he's got a big fat smile on his face, and he fits like a glove on that announce team. I thought the production of the show, the look of it, the feel, the lighting, everything about it, it looked great. It looked professional. It didn't look Bush League at all. It looked great. It was almost like walking in, you look at that studio and the flags and the ring and the logos and the graphics and everything, and it's almost like walking into a time warp, but with current wrestlers transplanted into this bygone era. One interesting thing, element of the show that I noticed, no entrance music. People walk out. I mean, they don't have very far to walk, right? They're not going down some long aisleway. No entrance music. Just like back in the day when you had studio wrestling, the NWA, there was no entrance music. You would walk to the ring or you would walk out, and talk to Crockett or talk to Shivani or whoever had the microphone in their hand and cut a promo. So they followed that blueprint here as well. No entrance music. I thought the promo work was fantastic. Nick Aldis, Eddie Kingston, and Tim Storm, to me, were the standouts. Eli Drake, let me say this about Eli Drake. Eli Drake is a guy who I still don't quite understand why he isn't in WWE or even in AEW. I'm sure NWA is very happy to have him. He could absolutely fit into a big promotion like that, and I think they would love him. He can talk. He's a great talker. I watch him, though, and I've always felt this way. I've always felt he is borrowing the inflection in his voice, the mannerisms, everything. He's trying to be The Rock. This is the first time that I've watched him where not only did I think he was trying to be The Rock, but about midway through, or maybe not even midway through his promo, he was almost like he morphed into Stone Cold. So I'm listening, and I'm really listening closely and paying attention to this guy. And he has become some sort of hybrid mix of The Rock and Steve Austin. Now, two people that I can understand why you would want to borrow a little bit from them, but I couldn't help but just notice it the whole time. That's all I'm thinking. Like, the way he's talking, he reminds me exactly of Steve Austin. He is borrowing from Steve Austin. And that's fine if that works for him, but I just couldn't think of anything else the entire time he was speaking. I don't even know what he said. All I could think is this guy it's like if I closed my eyes, I would think I was listening to Steve Austin. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The guy can talk. He can do his own thing. I don't even think he needs to really borrow from those two. But it was very obvious watching and listening to him. So you can put him on that list too, as far as standouts, but the ones that really caught my attention and that I enjoyed were Aldis. Nick Aldis, he carries himself like a world champion. He looks the part. He acts the part. Again, he can talk, very well spoken, and I can't say enough good things about him in that role. And this setting, by the way, in that studio setting, I felt like really highlighted that. I think it does him a world of good in that atmosphere. Eddie Kingston is just, Eddie Kingston is Eddie Kingston. What more can be said? We already know Eddie Kingston is a great promo. I didn't know how he would come off watching him in an old school setting like this, but he fit perfectly. I thought he was great. He, to me, was the standout on this entire show. And then later on, Tim Storm cutting this passionate promo talking about, if he doesn't win this match with Nick Aldis, if he doesn't win the championship, he can never again challenge for the NWA title. And it was the best time of his life, those few months when he was the champion. I guess it was 2017. I guess it would have been when he last held the NWA title. And he's in his 50s. I think he's a grandfather. He's a school teacher by day. It's this great story, of this guy who became the NWA champion, and it meant so much to him to travel around and defend that title, and he's got to win this match tonight. I thought his promo was great. Let me just go through some of the other things that happened here on this show, because they did, again, the Aldis promo at the beginning set up the match for later in the show with him and Tim Storm. We had a tag team, the Dawsons, Zane and Dave Dawson. They came out and made short work out of their opponents, and then they went over by the announcers and they cut a promo. Again, very simple, old school stuff. Then they had a promotional consideration paid for by the following spot. I can't do it the way Lord Alfred used to. But they had this spot, and apparently it was a real paid placement here from Austin Idol. Had a commercial here that he starred in plugging his own wrestling school. This looked, at first when I saw it, it looked like a funny skit. Had all these amateur graphics on the screen, but it was actually real. He's buying time on the show to promote his school. Now, Austin Idol is the man who Hulk Hogan credits with giving him the idea for the phrase Hulkamania, because it used to be Idolmania. And from that, Hogan said, and he came up with Hulkamania. He also credits Austin Idol with getting the cupping of the ear that Hogan made popular in his career. Chris Jericho still does it to kind of taunt the fans and tweak the fans a little bit. That all came from Austin Idol. So imagine that. One of the biggest stars in the history of the business admits that his act was in part influenced by Austin Idol. And he did it first. He was a great promo himself, Idol was. If you go watch some of his old promos online, he was a great promo back in the day. Might still be. I know he was serving as Nick Aldis' manager for a while when he first won the NWA title in 2017. I don't think it lasted too long, but he was managing Nick for a while. You can find videos online of the two of them together. So he's plugging his school, and the ad ends with him on screen saying, "Come on, baby, you want it? Let me give it to you." I don't know if this was an ad for a wrestling school or a dating app. It's a little creepy. Eli Drake, after cutting his promo, had a match with Caleb Conley, got a win over him. Again, he looks like a star, Drake does. He comes off as a star in this environment. And that's the bottom line, because Eli Drake said so. Josephus came out. I enjoyed the stuff with Josephus and Tim Storm, I believe it would have been. This is, again, going back probably a year and a half, 2 years now. They were doing some stuff with Josephus and him, and I didn't know who Josephus even was. But they were putting these videos together, and it was just really good character work. Even then, long before they had a TV show. That Corgan and Logano were these things that they were putting together. There was always this emphasis on character development and character building and personalities. Again, you can see it in their work, even going back to when Corgan first bought the NWA, which was probably, 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago this month, I believe, is when the sale went through. You can see it in everything they've done every step of the way. It's all about personalities and character development and getting people to care about these characters and learn more about them. And frankly, WWE may be the biggest company in the world. They may be making money hand over fist more than anyone else in the business is. But the one thing that they severely lack is good character development and good development of their personalities and showcasing their personalities and letting us into, kind of giving us a window into who these people are and why we should care. Because there's so much television to put together and they have so many freaking people on that roster and only so much television time, they don't do a good enough job of that. That's one of the areas, I think, where they could learn a thing or two from what someone like the NWA is doing. I would love for WWE to borrow and steal ideas from these other companies to help make me care more about their own performers. I don't know that there's ever been a time where I've cared less about who they put on TV. In 1 week, I care more about some of these people. We had the tag team champions, NWA tag team champions, Isaacs and Latimer. Latimer being the former Bram from TNA. I guess he's no longer re-signing those deals, huh? They took on Danny White, and Mims beat them in a tag team match. After this is where they were confronted by Eddie Kingston, and then Homicide came out, and there was a big brawl that broke out on the set. We had Josephus and James Storm. They had a brief match. And then we had the NWA champion, Nick Aldis, and Tim Storm. Another Storm. A lot of Storms. Tim Storm, James Storm, Lance Storm. Isn't there another Storm? Wasn't Storm one of the American Gladiators? He might have been an American Gladiator, too. They had a good match. I enjoyed this match. The story was Tim Storm has to win. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He doesn't win. He never again gets a shot at the NWA title, which means so much to him. And even towards the end of this match, so desperate he was to win this match and win that championship back that he resorted to a low blow on Nick Aldis. But in the end, he got rolled up and pinned, so it backfired. It didn't work for him. And I guess Tim Storm now can never again challenge for the NWA title. And we had a promo here at the end with Nick Aldis. Now, Nick Aldis has Camille. She's the woman that is, his valet, basically. And they're already building to something down the road, it seems, where there was a point in the match where he took a bump out of the ring and accidentally collided with Camille. And Joe Galli tried to bring that up in the interview, and Storm, or Aldis rather, would not let her answer. She wanted to answer the question, he wouldn't let her answer. So obviously they're building to something. It was almost like that old Randy Savage, Elizabeth dynamic. You don't talk to her, you talk to me kind of thing. So they're building to something down the road. We had credits. The credits rolled at the end of the show. That was a nice old school touch. WCW, not only did they used to do credits at the end of their big pay-per-views, they were doing it even into the mid-90s. It wasn't just some relic from the 80s. As late as the mid-90s, WCW still had credits rolling at the end of their pay-per-views. So the next set of tapings are slated for December 14, 15, and 16 back in the same studio in Atlanta. I did see some of the tapings, the spoilers and whatnot for things that are going to be coming up on the show, which I won't give away. But there's a lot of other people that we're going to be exposed to in the weeks to come. Some names that you would know. Colt Cabana, he's part of the roster there. The former Damian Sandow, he's there. Ken Kennedy. The Rock and Roll Express, we're going to be seeing them back in that studio setting in the upcoming weeks. I do plan to make this part of my weekly wrestling routine. They won me over with the first episode. If you didn't see it, I encourage you all to go on YouTube and check it out. I think you will enjoy it, even if you were not alive back then for that old era of studio wrestling. It's just a very well put together hour of pro wrestling, and I think you'll enjoy it.